So hopefully you've taken a break after what I suspect is a couple of hours of mob cycle number 1. Also, preferably with maybe a whiskey, but that could be just dreaming. Anyway, moving on to mob cycle number 2. This should be significantly shorter. We're aiming for, instead of 2 hours, under an hour. And part of this is because you've already gone through all of those steps, so you will be able to, everybody will be more familiar with all of them. The big focus of this whole mob cycle is about safety. I mean, the first mob cycle is really about covering better, no worse, and safety to some point, enough to at least commit, which took a lot of time and facilitation. But now we're going to focus purely on safety and do it from the beginning. So the instructions are pretty much the same in that you're going to ask them to identify one thing to extract, but now you can tell them that we're going to do this with deep safety, and we're going to focus on that highest level of safety, bug for bug compatibility. So we need to make sure that they have some technical background here that, once again, we can't provide, but we have video number 6, committing-deep safety, and here's where Arla will introduce those concepts to your developers. So now that they've watched that particular video and they understand what the focus is of this mob cycle, which I would encourage you to share with them, they're going to be so happy. I mean, they want deep safety. It's now on the table. So this will be also a mob cycle that's a little more pedantic, but you get to be also. So the first thing you're going to ask them to do once they have gone through the extraction is ask them if they will be using the tool approach or the recipe approach. Don't worry about what those are exactly. Just know that the tool approach is really easy, yay, and the recipe approach is less easy, boo, but oh well. If they have the tool approach, you can just skip all the way down to, in the facilitator's guide, to the tool approach where you really only have to do 3 things. Have them talk about how they'll discover and handle the tool limitations, because the tool is very, very safe for them to be able to use. And up to now, that's what you've been seeing in the simulation. So you really just need to first ask the question, how will you find bugs in your tool, and remember them. Once they know what those bugs are, have them write that list of bugs down as a set of check steps when doing a refactoring, and then go ahead and have them extract to a method using that tool method and name it just like last time. So very simple. However, for this segment, we're going to focus on the recipe approach. This is what you're going to need to be able to see a simulation of if they choose the recipe approach. Now we're going to demonstrate to you what the recipe approach would look like. You're going to have the mob open the linked recipe provided in the facilitator guide and make sure it's visible on the screen. So the right side having the recipe, the left side having the code. And you want to make sure that the mob is in agreement for each step before they actually take it. So, Arlo, go ahead and take it away.
Step 1, introduce a Lambda. Okay, so I'm going to surround my block with Lambda. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, that'd be equivalent. Make the function and immediately call it. And then I'm going to compile, and if I see those errors, I'll fix them. All right, so I'll figure out what to do if it doesn't compile. First, let's do the first part and make it compile. Okay, so there we go.
So Arlo, I have a question for you. I know that was a very small write, very few things that you wrote, but is there any chance whatsoever that you could make an error with writing directly in the code?
Something that tiny, really no, but there's a chance. Right? Yeah.
And your compiler may not catch that, correct?
There's probably some typo I could do that it wouldn't catch.
So just to be on the safe side, even though this is so small, let's create the habit of just copy paste from the recipe.
Okay, that seems really pedantic. But I guess pedantic is sort of the point of all of this. We want to be totally safe. So, all right, I will copy, I will paste it, and then I'll collapse that here.
And as facilitators, this is where we want to make sure that we're watching behaviors. So one of the behaviors that we want to be keeping an eye out for, and it's in your facilitator's guide, is changing the code by editing text. We don't want them to ever edit the code. unless the recipe specifically calls for it, that could happen, but they otherwise should be doing a copy and paste or a tool capability.
Okay, so I pasted those in place. I think I got it right. Let's build. Done building. It compiled. All right, cool. So there's no errors.
Okay, so for time's sake, we're going to go ahead and skip to the next step where I see Arlo performing a behavior that is not good for this particular approach.
Okay, so I've got to capture all these variables. So I get rid of the implicit capture. I compile. I find that there are problems. Okay, I need to figure out what those variables are. Probably input is one of them. I don't know about numbers up here. Let me see what else we've got. Stack. Where does stack come from?
Okay, so what you're seeing here is a lot of reading or an attempt to analyze. So as a facilitator who has literally no idea what's going on with the coding process, your cue here is that he's starting to try and understand the code in order to create that safety. So Arlo, we just need to, we're creating a process here. We just need to trust the recipe. Just do exactly what the recipe says.
I am robot. Okay.
You are robot.
All right. It says find for each variable that error about a variable that must be thinged. Okay. It says it can't find it, and it says input. Input can't be implicitly captured. Okay. Input goes there. Ampersand input. Oh, no, I put it in the wrong place. It goes there. Yes. Okay, I guess that worked.
Excellent. So now that you've seen an example of two major behaviors you're going to likely see in the mob. One is that they'll change code directly in the code by editing that text, and the other is that they'll try and understand that code. And here's where we want to really rigidly stick to exactly what the recipe says. So skipping to the final step, Arlo, you completed, let's say you went ahead and completed.
Okay, I've completed the extraction. I'm done with step 9. Now what?
All right, the first thing I want to ask you is this extraction safe? Does it require a test?
As long as there's no bug in the recipe, and that recipe was pretty damn pedantic. I compiled a lot. Yeah, I think it's safe. I think this is a lot safer than other things that I might have done and supported with a test. Yeah, we're good.
All right, excellent. So now we want to commit. So before we commit, I have 3 questions to ask. Is it safe?
Yes.
Is it better?
Yeah, I extracted a method. It's easier to read. Better.
Is it any worse?
No, getting the same performance is not really an issue. There's no other issues. Yeah, we're good.
All right, then go ahead and commit.
All right.
So as a non-coding facilitator, that seemed incredibly exhausting. The value, however, is that we're bringing with the tool or the recipe approach the ability to do static analysis without having to think about it during refactoring. Our job as a facilitator is simply to keep an eye on those behaviors outlined in the facilitator's guide and make sure that they're performing one of those static analysis techniques for provable refactoring. So closing that particular segment, we now are going to move on to the very last segment, which is articulating how everything comes together. We call this the insight loop.